Hi there. I want to do a really quick video on the aerobic threshold test and how to interpret your results. We will go over this. This will be the main thing that we talk about in the first Zoom that's on the 20th. But I want to explain how it works until then. And if you find that you need to do the test again, because it's an aerobic effort, remember this is the aerobic threshold, not the anaerobic threshold. So it should feel easy enough that you can do it again the next day because it is your aerobic training zone. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you how to interpret your results. So I'm here on my Training Peaks, and I did a run today that was not an actual test, but it was just an easy run. So I'll show you, we'll pretend that it was a test. And I was not wearing my heart rate strap. I was just using, it was just my my wrist monitor, so you can see that's why I get these wonky numbers at the beginning, but it actually did settle into something that's maybe normal. It's still a little off, but we'll just pretend these numbers are accurate. So get to where it settles in, and then you're going to, this is the summary part on the desktop. So you go to click on the workout and then go to analyze, and it'll pull up the data. And then find where it starts to settle in. So that's why we like to have you do the warm up first. And then once you kind of get a stabilizing spot, which is kind of normal for you, I'm going to, yeah, whatever. I'll start here. These numbers are wonky, but that's okay. So then you're going to highlight the first half. Call that. And you're going to look at what the average heart rate was. So the average was 158. And hopefully your max is also going to be closer to whatever that average is, because we really are wanting you to not fluctuate a whole lot. So if you start with a 180 minus your age number, then that would be hopefully closer to what the max is. This, again, I wear my watch pretty loose, so these numbers are not very accurate. And this was a hill, so. Okay, so you're gonna highlight that, you're gonna look at what the average heart rate was. Then you're gonna go to the second half, and you're gonna look at what the average heart rate is. So mine actually went down a tiny bit. If we went to the part that didn't have hills, we would get different information. The average is 154. So this is actually probably, hopefully, closer to what you have, where the average is actually pretty close to what the max is, because obviously a 180 heart rate is different on your body than a 160 heart rate. Okay, so anyway, so whatever the first half average heart rate is, and then the second half average heart rate is, you're wanting those two numbers to be within 5%. If they are much more, so let's say for the first half, let's say this average heart rate was 140, and then I went to here and it was 157, 140 and 157 is more than 5% difference. So I would want to start with a little bit lower heart rate. As it is, I happen to know that my aerobic threshold is 158, and that is where I'm very used to training. So I pretty much am always around 150 to 158. So if it's more than 5%, you want to try again. Start with a little bit lower heart rate. You can start with 5 beats lower. You can do the same thing. If you get basically zero change, you can go up you can try it again and you can go up 5 beats. But if you've been following along in Slack, you'll notice there's a conversation about this where at a certain point, your muscular capacity will kind of come up to meet where your aerobic. So your aerobic threshold maybe is fine aerobically and with your respiratory system, but for your muscular system, it's going to be a pretty big load. So we see that especially with cyclists, like your aerobic threshold, if you stay right at your aerobic threshold the whole time, is actually pretty challenging. And it's pretty much, and with running as well, if you're really used to doing that, it starts to bump up closer to your lactate threshold as well. And so, excuse me, you don't want to keep spending all of your time right at aerobic threshold. So if you get basically zero change, there's two things to think about. One, maybe you do need to up it. So that's particularly common if you're relatively new to aerobic training, but then you have spent some time working on it, you will see a bump in your aerobic threshold. And then the second thing is, or if you're just coming back after injury or anything like that, if it doesn't really change and it's not something where it's like a super easy effort, then that's okay. Then just keep your aerobic threshold there. And then what will be interesting to know is what your anaerobic threshold is. So the anaerobic threshold, you'll be testing in a little bit, which is where your ventilatory shift happens. And you start burning, you start producing more lactate than your body can reabsorb and use. So for the most part, you're going to be staying under your aerobic threshold the whole time. Intervals and stuff is when you might get into zone 3 and doing some anaerobic threshold work. But for this test, we're really wanting to know what your aerobic threshold is. So take each time as just a data point. You can do these relatively frequently. This is a route that I do all the time. And so I can see how it changes over time. My aerobic threshold might not change, but my speed at aerobic threshold can change. So that's something to think about. And again, we're going to get into all the metrics when we meet, but I wanted to at least show you what this looks like. So then if you want to set your zones, you go in to your calendar, you go into your settings, and you go to zones. And if you're new to Training Peaks, you probably have like several more zones that it shows. You can just remove those. We just use 4. If you really like having 5, you can add 1 in between. But we like to have the top of zone 2 be your aerobic threshold. So then that goes at the top of that. And then zone 3 is tempo and up to lactate threshold. So I know what my lactate threshold is, so I can put that in. And then beyond that, it's just hard and max VO2. And you want to just make it high enough that it's going to capture everything. But we're not going to be spending time at 200 beats per minute. If you get a notification from Training Peaks saying that you've reached a new threshold, what they're talking about is this number here with this value, and that is your lactate threshold or your anaerobic threshold, not your aerobic threshold. So you can have it change that to modify this number, but the test that you just did is for your aerobic threshold. So that is the deal for that. And again, we will go over this when we talk in a couple weeks, week and a half. We just want to make sure that you guys get going and, just kind of get an idea for the feel of the training. If you need to retest, you can. You can do it on any of the easy days. Feel free to just switch that out. And then we will answer any questions in Slack and when we meet on Zoom. Okay. Hopefully this helps a little bit.